And I can honestly say, when I was a small child, I desired to be a pastor someday, as a very small child. Later, when we started going to liberal churches in my teenage years, that desire went away. Because I just didn't really have a lot of respect for the pastors that I was seeing. They weren't really good role models. And so, I looked at them and I didn't want to be them. So I kind of forgot about it when I was a teenager and just kind of had other plans for my life. But when I got into an independent, fundamental, soul-winning, hard-preaching church, right around the time I turned 17 years old, and I had a pastor that I could look at, Pastor Nichols at Regency Baptist Church I went to, I look at him and say, okay, here's a guy that is a real man.
I remember there was one time that Pastor Nichols told me that I was acting like a dog in heat.
What else is on the internet? All kinds of things.
The word majesty, I like that word because the word majesty has several definitions. One is that of being royal, of being regal or regency.
When I was at Regency Baptist Church, while I went to Regency Baptist Church in Sacramento, California.
My sister was only 11 years old. And that's one of the things that I commented was like, either way, Roger got kicked out of Regency at the time.
We would always go in. It would be me. His parents spoke Spanish, so they had to have a translator, which was his sister and her husband, which I didn't, which was unnecessary. The youth pastor, the pastor's wife, his parents, and my parents in a big group every time. And then we would get suspended. So we get suspended. I think the longest we got suspended was for like 3 weeks one time because, It was at first cheesy love notes, and then it started, it was a Wednesday night after church, and we were over, the church had a little separate house, and he had asked me in my notes before to kiss me, and I had always told him that like we had to wait till we got married.
Yeah.
So...
But they had gotten expelled from public school.
Okay, now we see that there is these 2 new boys, and we're seeing that they're honing in on these certain 3 girls. Why? And Roger was really close to my brother, and I think that was such a big thing too, because when they came in, it was also a big deal for my brother because he was so excited to have a friend, and they honed in on that hardcore. They would want to come over. They would make it all in the name of my brother. But in reality, it was really just a way to come over and be a grooming, for lack of better. It was a way for them to come over and groom because for the first 3 to 5 months, or I should say about 3 months, that's what it was. It was purely grooming and just these rules are silly and they say these things. It's because you're older and that's not what it means, but you're getting older and the church is just protecting you because Roger was specifically, he was trying to get me to not feel so guilty because I really did. Just my little 11-year-old mind thinking. And then he told me that he was going to get a pig and that we would get a fake passport and we would fly to Venezuela and he would marry me there. And I think that's probably what the last 2 months of our relationship was, him trying to convince me to move to Venezuela at 11 years old because his uncle had land there and would let us live there.
We're not talking about like, oh, I heard a story. Like even if it was just like, oh, I listened to the Preach Boys podcast and I heard a story of this girl who said something about Roger. It's like, it's not a he said, she said 12, people down the line. It's like, no, this is my wife and her sister that I'm talking about here. This is not like something that I heard through the grapevine one time.
A great men of God, that'd be Roger Jimenez, and that would be David Berzins, and that would be Donnie Romero. And let me tell you something about these 3 guys. They were always, and have always been, very respectful to me, always.
The letters were progressively getting worse, or more aggressive, I should say, and more inappropriate. And then we ended up, he asked me to sneak out of my house at 1 a.m. one morning. And I did. And I will never forget because I had a friend that was at the house and I felt so guilty after I got back and I was so scared. And I remember telling him that I couldn't do it anymore. I was so scared of getting in trouble again. And I remember him telling me that I was just all of this was for nothing. And I pretty much can't remember the exact terms that he used, but I was used now. And mind you, we just kissed. That's all we did. But I was used now, and that I pretty much just was, that's it. Like, if we're not going to be together at 11, then that's just pretty much the vibe was just like, I was just gross.
No.
And it was really scarring because at 11, you can't see the future. So my world was over because I was used and gross.
I knew these people. So for you to jump in and just be like, call me a liar? Like, that's when I'm like, my blood started boiling.
Well,
like, are you kidding?
When you're talking to an 18-year-old whose only context is knowing Roger in like this light of authority and like, this is our guy and he's the man and he's our direct line to God and whatever else. It's like, it's gotta be insanely difficult to view that person in any sort of negative light, because that shakes the entire foundation.
Yeah. God ordained a pastor for a reason. And not only that, he gave qualifications for a reason. Why didn't he just say, hey, anybody who feels led, just get up there and preach and lead and so forth? Why didn't he say that? Because he wanted people to be taught and led and fed by someone who is a proven, qualified person. That's why.
Todd with Reason Files. Today we have a couple clips lined up. We're still talking with Jacob, former member of Fellowship Baptist Church. The topic of conversation, sewer rat, Mark Wayne Lewis, and everything that brings forth after its own kind. Like little sewer rat Roger Jimenez. Apparently Mark and Roger are still good friends. Also, it was relayed to me by Sarah that she would talk to Roger on occasion when Mark was in prison. Apparently Roger was keeping tabs on the guy who sent him out to start Verity Baptist Church. Let's take a listen to what Jacob had to say.
And you know, me and Sarah, when we was texting this evening, that Roger Jimenez, I know he may seem like him, you did say, well, he seems like a nice guy. But you know what? Roger hides the fact that he won't mention that church or Mark's name. Now, he'll mention them, oh, I got hooked up with a good church and a good pastor and da-da-da-da-da. But he won't mention Fellowship Baptist Church or Mark Wayne Lewis.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
It's bad advertisement for him now.
Yeah, and it's a very bad advertisement. Yeah, but I'm sorry, but I'm gonna get a little tongue-tied here. But in that clip, you see where he's sitting down talking to Anderson. Oh, we got hooked into a good church right by the Air Force Base. Great preaching. Da 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 da. And once again, no church name, and certainly not no Mark Wayne Lewis name. And I'm gonna nail down, find out exactly when that was recorded. But we had another listener or someone subscribed to the channel said that Mark Wayne Lewis was in prison when that was recorded. So here, Mark Wayne Lewis, that church is shut down. He's not in charge of it anymore. He's in prison. And here, Roger Jimenez, oh, it's a good church we got plugged into.
Yeah.
No.
And to be honest, it would not surprise me one bit if Mark and his new fiance Christy were going up. Not necessarily all the time, because as far as I know, they live in Salinas, but. Wouldn't surprise me if he went to service up there. Has been or will go. At Rogers Church.
Wow.
Wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah. This guy is awful bold. I mean,
So when before he went to jail, excuse me, my throat's all messed up. Before he went to jail, I was supposed to testify against him, but he ultimately took a plea deal,
Right.
because he said that the church hadn't been doing enough, so he'll just take the rap for the church. No, you took the rap because you didn't want the more time. You knew you were going to get convicted of more time. You didn't do it. So he still, to this day, swears that he's innocent of everything. Everybody's against him. Everybody's wrong except Mark.
Right. That's how typical narcissist move, blame game. He blames everybody else for his problems and his plight, and it's you know, and the three people that he put up to do that, the three transients, the two guys and the gal, he was letting them live in the church there, from my understanding.
Yeah, he let multiple people. He let multiple people live up there at different times. There was people living on the pews. They would literally sleep on the pews in the not where the main service was, but in the next door. So there's two little buildings, and it was a boy. It was a guy and a girl. They weren't married, and they were using meth. No doubt at the church, they were meth addicts. I mean, the drug addicts don't care where they're at when they do it. They're just doing drugs.
Right.
And they were sleeping on the pews in the church. And his only thing was, you got to be awake before, a certain time, before people start showing up. And only a handful of people knew about it, but yeah, he would let people stay out there all the time.
More issues in a Sunday newspaper there to deal with, and finally we're going to move on and talk a little bit about some of the money, the finances of Fellowship Baptist Church, and a few pictures here in the slideshow that should be interesting, and we'll give Jacob the last word. Let's listen.
He's continuing to hurt people by, like, a couple of the older ladies in the church, taking their property, that he had them sign over their property into his name. He's just a scumbag.
Yeah. Reason files out.
What else is on the internet?
Dear Brother Jeremy, no sir. Stephen Anderson is not ordained, nor was he sent from any church, certainly not from Regency Baptist Church. He is a self-appointed pastor. He quit Bible college and started his church. He told me he was quitting school and going to Phoenix to start a church. I told him he was young and needed to work under a pastor to get some experience. He said nope. He was going. Well, our people knew him. So at the invitation of the next service I told the folks what his plans were and we prayed for him. We did not ordain him or send him out to be a pastor. He decided God wanted him to pastor and off he went. He has claimed for years that we are his mother sending church, which is patently false. A few years ago when he preached his sermon how he prayed for Obama to die, TV stations came to our church to interview me. At that point he finally responded to my requests and took my name and church's name off of his website. Your friend in Christ, Brother Nichols.
Unruly people who basically are just preaching whatever. God didn't call them. God isn't sending them. They're not even out of a local church many times. They just basically ordain themselves pastor and teach all this nonsense.